Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the Foxeer Pico Razer. This camera measures 12 millimeters by 12 millimeters. From the back to the lens is almost 13 millimeters. Lens is about 10 millimeters. The screw mount for the lens is 8.32 millimeters. And it weighs just a touch over 2 grams. We're gonna jump right into the flight portion and look at all that wind. And I just had to, because this camera doesn't have any mounts, I kind of had to rig this thing up. What I did was I took a print that typically mounts these, and then I stuck it to the top of the quad that I typically fly cameras around for in order to record the videos and get to show you the camera in the different scenes, lights, things of that nature. The first time I did it, I found that it wasn't secured down very well, so I had wobbles and bobbles all over the place. Second time I did it, it was a little bit better. And third time, I can still see a little bit of a shimmer or shake in there, so I apologize if you're seeing that too. It's kind of tricky to mount these things up where there's no traditional mounting. The alternative would have been to use it into a traditional whoop mount. But this is what I did. I think it's a pretty decent job. It's sitting on top of the quad and electrical tape down, so it is what it is. But you might be wondering why we jumped right into the flight footage and we didn't do the light test. Typically I do the light test. If you're familiar with the channel, I do the light test first. And that is because we're going to do a comparison. After we have this look around in this view as a solo sort of video, we will jump into comparing it to the original Nano 3. That is by RunCam. And you might be asking then again, why the original Nano 3? Well, because the price is similar and the weight is somewhat similar. I know some people have new Nano 3s from RunCam and they're not very happy with them, or at least I've seen a post or two online. And there is a fair difference between, from what I've seen, between the original RunCam Nano 3, which I had bought like 8 of them when they came out, when they became available, versus the new lens. The new lens on the RunCam Nano 3, unfortunately the company that made the original lens around the virus time went out of business, so RunCam had to source a different lens from a different company, and it doesn't work quite as well. So there you have it. But for those of you that have a Mobula 6, at least one of the original ones that came out, and I'll show you, you can tell the difference in the lens. I don't have a new one with the different lens to show you. All I have is all these old ones that I bought when the Mobula 6 first came out. But back to the Foxeer Pico Razer, you know, we're flying it around, we've got a fair bit of sun, and one of the things that I'm surprised for a camera like this, kind of a throwback camera almost, is that it's handling the light pretty dang well. And we'll get to compare that to the RunCam Nano 3 in that comparison, which I think will be pretty important for many people to see how it holds up, because that original Nano 3 was a pretty revolutionary camera for its weight. This one is a little bit more. It's got that plastic housing on there that secures the mount to the board and the sensor, but I think this one does a pretty good job. You could take a look for yourselves what you think of the color representation, how you see it representing the sky, the clouds. The clouds don't have a sharp shape to them. You might see that from time to time as I'm kind of flying about and being a little bit ginger because of all that wind. And quite honestly, as I'm flying this, I'm not even sure if this footage is going to work out or not, but it turns out, in my opinion, it works out fairly well. But this is the wind out front. It gets to howling every now and again. That's why I oftentimes fly out back, is because the wind gets knocked down quite a bit, especially out here on the road, because of the road orientation and the wind during the warmer months. It tends to blow right down the road, and you'll see it push me around a fair bit. But we have had an opportunity to look at some flowers. We've had an opportunity to run up and down the road. We've got to see some red cars, some gray cars, some was there a black car in there as well, as we're staring here at my neighbor's red truck. And you can see those clouds in the sky. They're not terrible. I don't want to exaggerate that. I just thought they should be a little bit sharper from time to time. Depending upon the angle of the lens to the sun, you'll see that the clouds maybe aren't quite as sharp as you might expect them to as well. But judge that for yourself. You don't need to listen to me. If you have a Foxeer Pico Razer of your own, please leave your comment down in the comment section down below and let other people know about your first-hand, first-world experience. We're going to fly over here to the garage. It's kind of one of our last things to look at the lens distortion, if it has any. To me, this looks relatively true as far as the size and the shape of those garage doors. So if there's lens distortion, it might be in the corners, or I'm not seeing it. So again, something that you have to look at. I can't necessarily tell you about. As a refresher, the Foxeer Pico Razer, just a touch over 2 grams. I cut a length of wire to make them both the same, with the same connector. The original RunCam Nano 3 with that little mount Comes in at 1 3/4 grams. Without the mount and the 2 screws, it weighs 1.5 grams. So we walk out of the garage, and this is where we're going to do our light test. You get to compare the Runcam Nano 3. Again, this is the lens that you can't get anymore, and the Foxeer Pico Razer. Cover the lens, pull it off, cover the lens, pull it off, various lengths. This day was much nicer. It's too bad this is on my board and not on the quad. It would have been a lot easier to fly it around during this day because the wind was much less severe. We're going to back up a little bit to see, just get the lens directly in the sunlight as well as being able to see in that relatively dark garage, just to kind of check that comparison. The Nano 3 seems like a much wider field of view, or much more distorted field of view in its width than the Pico Razer, so that's something else that you should take a note of. Look how wide the garage door is versus the Pico Razer. We're going to pan around the neighborhood. And as much as I'm a fan of the original Runcam Nano 3, when I did this, I was fairly surprised at how well, in my opinion, how well the Foxeer Pico Razer looks. Poor sad flowers, they're drooping down a little bit. I watered them right after I did this. It actually got to be quite hot for about 9 days. We were having about 10 degrees higher than normal temperatures, so it's pretty smoking hot. I'm pretty certain by the time I get done walking around on this test that I've got a little bit of a sweat worked up just from being outside, and humid too. And we were having oftentimes, you know, those late night thunderstorms that start around 11 o'clock or so at night. This section, let's stop it right here just to look at the difference in the greens. See how the green on the Razer appears versus the Runcam Nano. It's outside of the sharpness in the image and how the image looks, the greens are quite a bit different. So that's something I wanted to draw your attention to. You can also look at the trees across the cul-de-sac to get another comparison on how the image looks at a distance, because, you know, distance is important. This camera comes in just under $18, if you're wondering about the price, which is very comparable to what we saw with the Caddx Ant. You might be asking where my Caddx Ant review is. Well, the first one I got was all kind of lime green. And so if I'm going to review that, it's going to have to be a fresh one because that camera is buggered. There's something wrong with it. Something to take note, though, is, you know, a camera review unit was sent out and it was all lime green. It was kind of the oddest thing. I put together a sample, send it to Caddx. We'll see how they respond to it. I think I'm going to turn and get behind the mailbox of my neighbors with all the vines and greenery hanging off of it, and I'm going to kind of swing it out from behind there in a second after I get done doing this panning. I've watched this footage several times, but I sometimes misremember things. Yeah, here we go. We're going to get behind the mailbox, and we're going to, again, I've got 2 cameras on the board. They're about 2 inches apart on the board, and so I'm just doing different things so that you can grade out the camera. Obviously, the light handling, well, I shouldn't say obviously. In my opinion, the light handling on the Pico Razer is far superior to the Runcam Nano 3, which I'm really surprised by. I thought the light handling on the Nano 3 was really, really good for a camera of that weight and size. Yes, the Pico Razer is slightly heavier, but depending upon your priorities, if that 1/4 gram is a deal breaker, or maybe if you're seeing it as 1/3 of a gram, that's something that you'll have to take note of. Make our way back to the house, and once again you get to look at the garage and the difference in how they visually appear. The garage doors, they're single car garage doors, they're not double car garage doors, so the Nano 3 kind of makes them look like they might be for 2 cars on each door. They are not. They're single cars. We have a Chrysler Pacifica, which is a minivan that goes right in there fairly comfortably. I think if you had a much bigger vehicle, it probably wouldn't. Like if you had a large truck, I don't even know what truck models are called. I haven't looked at those in years, but those are regular sized garage doors is what I'm trying to say. We do that same thing where we try to look into the garage when we have light directly on the lens. Just an interesting little sample of things I thought we should look at, because flying into dark spaces is something that we do, especially if you're flying this in a whoop type quad and you're going from indoor to outdoor. That can be something that you want to see in order to be able to tell if you're going to be able to do that, or how well you're going to be able to do that. Are you going to be flying blind as you head towards the door and just kind of head towards the light, so to speak? or are you going to be able to see? And of course we go inside because this is a super micro camera and we need to see it inside the house. I'm sure many of you have seen the inside of my house many times and can grade out the coloring and how it's handled across all sorts of different cameras because I've flown in the house. I fly in the house almost every day. I get that question quite a bit of how I fly acro in the house. I'll tell the story while we walk around here real quick. It was probably about 2.5 to 3 years ago. Maybe my timeline is a bit off. But Albert Kim had said that he thought I could fly acro indoors on a, I think it was this Beetle or B-shaped kind of Whoop type of machine, and it had these 10mm motors, and it was running 2S, and it actually flew fairly well for at that time. And ever since that quad, and I flew it and reviewed it in acro in the house, that's what I've done. So it's just a matter of taking your time and practicing and enjoying the time that you have flying, whether it's in a small space, a big space, whether it's in acro or angle mode. Just take your time, have fun. I fly about 2 to 4 packs every day before I go to bed at the very least, and I fly them just kind of puttering around in the basement, just, you know, kind of going in and out and doing different little things. And so that's part of my routine. Of course, when we're out of town on vacation, I don't necessarily have that time to fly. I did throw in some nighttime samples here. I don't know how useful this is, but you know, I wanted to do it. I had the opportunity. Of course, it gets dark every night, so the opportunity is always there. It really, I don't know how flyable it's going to be. I think you'd have to get into a parking lot, but it gives you the opportunity to look at the two different cameras and then compare their light handling in a dark scenario as well. I don't plan on flying this, but as I walk over to my neighbor's house, because they have a brighter porch light, our porch light, they have a brighter yard light than ours. Ours, for summer, I think it's just weathered and I need to replace it, but they're such a pain to replace. They have much brighter lights and they've got a nice space to walk over to, so I walk over to their driveway. They're actually moving, sadly. Really nice neighbors, Gary and Diane, but their kids are all grown and having families of their own, so they're relocating to where at least one or more of their kids have moved and started a life too. So we'll be sad to see them go, but I wanted to walk over here to get another light sample for you, even though I don't think you would probably fly this unless it was like parking light lots, or maybe this is a simulation for parking garages. I can't say because I've never flown in one, but I'll throw that out at you as something else to digest and decide which you think is better. So I said I'd show you the lens difference between the old and new. This is the original, and you can see the lens type. The newer one has a smaller enclosure around the lens, so it actually has a smaller field of view. Some say it has a purple hue or color to it. Some say different things about it. So I wanted to show you that. It's just the lens that's different, and it does look a bit different. There's almost like, see how this is real smooth around the outside edge of the lens where it holds the glass or the plastic, whatever the lens is made up of? The new one isn't smooth like that either, so that's another easy way to tell. But back to the Pico Razer. What do you think of this little camera? Is it the camera for you? If you do want to check it out, I'll have links to Foxeer's website and various resellers that might be selling them at this time. And if you have any other comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.